Washington has a strong transfer portal class.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, we've got a really fun show coming up today where we're going to really dive into the transfer portal class. We're going to talk about the most important players, in our opinion, that are not trench guys, because we know that that is by far most important thing. We're going to talk about Peyton Waters hitting the transfer portal, just getting our thoughts a little bit there. But we want to really break down this class, where we want to give some grades and just go through it, because this is a really strong class in terms of what Washington needed. Is it perfect? No. We're going to get there. But in terms of what we needed to see this team come away with, in terms of especially the top end guys, this is really solid.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it, in a way, not a lot of it, I should say, because the more you think about it, you have three linebacker transfers, but two potentially that will play this season. One, if Jacob Manu, as you mentioned, Scott Eklund's report, if he doesn't end up playing, that takes a little bit of sting away from it. Not a huge amount, not a, well, now you have no linebackers coming in, which was, again, the whole impetus on getting multiple linebackers in this class. You needed to get at least two, if not three, and that third could be Jacob Manu on a red shirt, knowing that you'll have him next year and Buddha can go to the NFL after this coming season if he wants to. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's not going to be the wow names. It's not the Jameer Otis. It's not the, I guess in a way you have Tacario, which is the obvious, I guess you want to say, headliner of the class.
Yeah.
At least on defense, you could say Johntay Cook on offense. I personally would put in an honorable mention for the offensive lineman, Carver Willis. It's one of those, we beat that dead horse to too many days here. But with that being said, you look at the class top to bottom, it's solid. It's not what it ultimately could have been. And I think that what the spring transfer portal will use for that is, shore some things up. Sure, maybe if it's a B- right now, make it a B+. Make it an A-, those sort of things. Because that's where we're going to see, is Jedd okay with an 8-4 to 10-2 season? Or is he going to lock in a 10-2 season and say, hey, we're going to get a couple more pieces? We saw how things went in spring camp, but we won't know that for a couple more months.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I'm glad that's the way you want to start this, because outside of the trenches, which is probably the biggest drawback, where the bodies are solid, we don't want to act like they're not. The bodies are solid. You and I went into this feeling that you could have done more. And we're certainly going to spend a lot of time, we did the other day as well, about why they might not have done more. But I look at the trenches and I say, you got the top end guys that you needed at both positions. You got a true top end tackle in Carver Willis. You got a true top end defensive tackle in Simote Pepa, where those were the guys that you really needed to come away with. And you did, where Simote Pepa is not going to have the flash of a Jaheim Otis or of some of these other guys that, had 5-star rankings, high 4 stars coming out of high school. But he's somebody who was productive enough when he was healthy, especially in a really solid defense like Utah, that you need. And then you talk about Buddha Al-Uqdah. You talk about X-Ray Alexander. Those are really solid names. You look at safety and say Alex McLaughlin and CJ Christian are more than solid. I want to get to them when we talk about Peyton Waters, but I look at that. And then, of course, there's Tacario Davis. You get a nice tight end piece that you can add in Cade Eldridge. I'm just going through all the names here because it's important to talk about all these guys. And then, of course, Johntay Cook as well, where there's a whole lot going there, where Gear and Hatchet, I feel, is the only name I might have left out there. Interior Thompson, Taitayu and Golole, just so I can say, hey, look, there you go. Outside of special teams, which you did a great job of highlighting the other day. But I say all that to get to my grade, which right now is, Lars, as you mentioned a minute ago, it's a B-, where it's solid. The names are there. The positions are there. You saw an emphasis at positions of need. For one reason or another, it might not have worked out. Those are things we're certainly going to dive into. We have a little bit with our insiders for one or two names, because you can look at Jordan Dwyer. You can look at Jeray Bledsoe. You could say, getting that guy, hey, yeah, maybe that's a B+, maybe that's an A. But right now, with where everything has gone, this is a really solid class that I think that fans looking at, hey, did you really improve your roster? You can go into this and say yes.
Exactly. And, B minus B, whichever one you want to call, in the whole grading per thing, it's 81, 82%. It's above an 80. Let's put it that way. It's not an 85, but it's between an 80 and 84. And I think the reason why I'm a little bit hesitant, and also much like your favorite season, the offseason, NFL draft grades, you can look back and say, oh, well, hey, they gave us a C+ on draft day. But we look back and it's like, well, hey, let's use a Seahawks example with Tyrese Knight, linebacker, for example, where he's a 4th-round pick, but ends up playing very well, ends up playing most of the season, ends up being a significant contributor. You can look back and say, oh, that's C+. Maybe it was a B-, maybe it was a B. And you can take the coaching, and that's why I'm bringing this all to say Antonio Thompson, Tai Uyunglele, 2 guys where you can look at it and say, one guy had a little more, efficiency, especially at Arizona with Tai, and Antonio Thompson kind of bouncing between Iowa and Western Michigan. But a guy who can make an impact, 2 guys who can make an impact with the right coaching. And so if Ryan Walters can scheme things up, and Jason Cabusi, who we both know, look what he did with Voight Tanupi this last year. Now, part of that, Steve Belichick should get a shout out on some level. But Jason Cabusi, as the position coach, you saw the progress. Some guys got hurt, but I think those 2 guys in particular could say, maybe it's not the biggest name in the world, but they might have better production than some of these other big guys. Like I mentioned a couple months ago, Philip Bleedy. He didn't light the world on fire at Auburn. Joey Slackman did not light the world on fire at Florida. So you can kind of look at guys and say, hey, they missed on him. It's like, well, did they? Did they really miss on him? Or is it a case of right now it looks like a miss, but you could coach your guys into being better takes?
So since some people are obsessed with the rankings, Lars, do you know what the On3 transfer portal ranking is right now for Washington's class?
It's 16, 17, somewhere in that ballpark.
9. They're inside the top 10. So I think that's solid. And I think that's a good thing for us to mention. Where does that matter at the end of the day? As you just perfectly alluded to, no, not really. But it's nice to know that people can look at this class and say, hey, yeah, this is really solid for reason X, Y, and Z. Obviously, they have Washington with 2 4-stars coming in. It's Johntay Cook and it's Tacario Davis. But I look at everything that this class is, and I think you address needs where I want to get to all the losses when we get to Peyton Waters, because I think he'd be in my top 3. But I look at just everything that this class is, and I say you improved at the areas you needed to improve on. Did you improve enough? Probably not. But as you said, you can use the spring portal. There are going to be guys transferring out because you're over the 85 right now. So if you fall down far enough, you can add another offensive lineman. You can add another defensive lineman. Of course, you don't want to. And Jedd has spent, countless press conferences telling us why with, hey, we want a full offseason. We want these guys to be here for spring ball. We need just all of that extra experience because that's all really helpful for us at the end of the day. We saw what an offensive line looks like when you have to piece it together through just the spring transfer portal window. You don't want to do that. But if you come out of, let's just say you come out of spring practice with 4 out of 5 solidified starters, whoever that might be, we don't need to get into that now. And you say, yeah, we need one guy to plug in at, let's just say, left guard. And all of a sudden you're going to be a lot happier with that. And if it's because Carver Willis is holding it down and Garrett Hatchett's had a strong spring practice and Landon Hatchett's come along nicely after the injury and Jerez Party's improved, or Maximus McCree has locked down the other tackle spot. Great. Whatever that is, great. And we can look back at this class and say, you made the right improvements, because what matters the most is improving around Damon Williams. And it feels like you did that. It feels like you put him in a better position to go into year 2, especially defensively, because you improved the physicality up front in the front 7, which is probably the most important thing. But Lars, they lost a big piece on the back end in safety Peyton Waters, and I think this might be the second biggest loss of the transfer portal season. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, worrying, and wondering about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind of knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live, full service, real-time updates on the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So Lars, when Peyton Waters hit the transfer portal on Tuesday night, I don't know what day it is anymore. Let's say Tuesday night. If I'm right, great.
It was.
Thank you. I was stunned because this is a guy who you and I both projected to be in the rotation this season. This is a guy who, we projected when we looked at the top 4 safeties, we said, hey, it's McEllisteen. It's one of Alex McLaughlin or CJ Christian. It's the other one of Alex McLaughlin and CJ Christian. And then it's Peyton Waters. Now he's decided to hit the transfer portal. And I just think this is the second biggest loss we've seen so far. And that's behind Thaddeus Dixon.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was trying to figure out who your one would be. I'm like, it has to be Thad. Like I was curious if it's 2 or 3. It's the question is it 2 or 3? Unlike his position coach, which publicly, we had different reactions. We're both in lockstep here. Like I am also shocked. But at the same point, as I was writing that story, when he the news broke by Matt Zenitz in 247, I looked into it, like, well, let's consider the facts here. Committed early to Chuck Morrell and Kalen Moore. Did not really entertain much after that. And again, at the time in 23, long time ago, way, way long back in the yesteryears of this program, they were chasing a national championship. So it's kind of hard to decommit from the program at that point. Ends up enrolling early. Does go in the transfer portal the first time, I believe on January 21st, came out 10 days later. So we are on day 2. As we record this on Thursday. So for Wednesday will be day 3 that he's in the portal. So he's got a whole nother week to match that. I think we'll know by Monday what that situation is and whether or not Peyton Waters comes back or not. I honestly, at this point, would not expect either to come back.
I agree with you. And I think the biggest overarching reason is with Peyton Waters on the roster, you have 7 safeties that are listed as sophomores or younger. So that's sophomores, redshirt freshmen, true freshmen. There are because Peyton is a sophomore. Vincent Holmes will be listed as a third-year sophomore. And then there's Raheem Wright, there's Rashawn Clark, there's Paul Menke, and you got Ryland Dillard-Allen also on the roster. When you add in Peyton Waters, that's 7. I was like, wait, my math is accurate there. So somebody was going to leave. That is just a fact. That is something you and I have talked about off the air for some time now, where this is going to be a position where we saw some kind of turnover. We just didn't expect Peyton Waters to be the body is the thing here. And so seeing him leave is one part of it. And I just look at him, I say, and one of the reasons I'm so shocked is this is a guy who the coaching staff prioritized, where not only getting him back out of the transfer portal, but then working with him, putting him in on the first team defense. We saw that in the spring and in the fall. And then he played in every game. Mainly on special teams, but it was something where this is how much they like him. This is how much they want to have this guy around, this body around is, hey, we're willing to burn your red shirt by playing you on special teams. So that's where the shock factor comes in for me. And then I say second biggest transfer portal loss is just the versatility as an athlete that he brought to the secondary. He's a big, really well-built body where Thaddeus Dixon, obviously the production with just one more year remaining is really important. Then Kamori House is third for me. But with Peyton, I put him above Kamori House because the productivity and everything that he showed at the high school level on both sides of the ball is really important. He plays with a very, very high football IQ. And this is a guy who, wherever he ends up, it's going to be something where if he starts right away as a true sophomore, no matter what that program is, I don't think either you or I would be shocked.
No, and I think, but it was kind of as you ran through the numbers, it's just, okay, once you brought in a second safety transfer plus Mikkel, so now you have 3 veterans. So where's your 4th going to come from? And Jedd's all about playing young guys. And yeah, you can do the whole Oregon routine of, hey, we got, he played 7 games on defense, but he got 4 snaps here, 5 snaps here, 7 snaps here, 3 snaps here. It doesn't really count. It's a matter of, because when you mentioned he played in all 13 games, he did. He only got 13 snaps on defense is the problem. I think actually 9 now that I think about it, because it was 4, and he had like 2 or 3 in one other one. But he did play against Oregon, Did play against what was the other game? Penn State. Did get some time against Penn State. So got some legitimate game time. It was the kind of the game where it's like, hey, we're turning it over to the future of the program. But it's almost a mixed message to Peyton. And then you add on to it, my DB's coach is gone, or my safety's coach is gone. The DC is gone.
Sure.
Ryan Walters is on the road recruiting, which as he should be. But it's like, how much time has Peyton and Ryan Walters gotten a chance to connect, knowing that, hey, I'm a good DB coach. We can maybe, I think, because you're absolutely right. It came down to a numbers game, which again is why I honestly wouldn't be surprised if one more safety transfers out by the end of spring, just because you look at those numbers. Because you look at those numbers and somebody's got to.
So in terms of numbers, that's why where it's maybe it would have been X player or Y player. We're not going to just say, hey, this guy we think should transfer, because that's a problematic road. But I say that because I think one thing you mentioned that I'm sure, some of the everydayers out there are listening to this and saying is, well, why'd you bring in two safeties? Is because you needed some kind of experience in the room. And bringing in Alex McLaughlin, you and I have talked about him. I called him the most underrated transfer in the country. Like, this is a guy who we really like in terms of the production, in terms of the film. It's all there. It's all there to be a really productive, high-level Big Ten player. Like, that's what he is. And CJ Christian is another guy who has the production that you're looking for. He has the experience that you're looking for. He's got that veteran leadership and that just ability to be a thumper in the secondary, which, all due respect to McEllisteen, they didn't have. So bringing in somebody to just be that enforcer and be somebody who can come up and play linebacker and do some of those things. I know the Ryan Walters scheme doesn't necessarily do it the same way, but having somebody who can fill that role when needed and still play an important part in so many different other parts of this defense in CJ, that's important. And we know Jedd likes to prioritize young players, and you and I believe that Peyton is somebody that absolutely needs to be prioritized. But seeing somebody leave that room because of the veterans being brought in ahead of them is where the not so much of a shock factor comes in.
Well, that, and then the impetus of getting a 4-star and rallying it down, getting Donovan Robinson as a safety linebacker to where you're keeping that young talent coming in. You're not looking at it saying, hey, we have just, again, Ryland is probably the headliner in the secondary when it comes to safety. Absolutely. But we both are big fans of Donovan Robinson. And depending on where Jonathan Everson lines up, you can throw him in that mix as well. I don't think so, but just you want to throw in a third defensive back in there somewhere, call it 3, make it a day, whatever. But with that being said, you look at the talent coming in, the talent going out, and the talent returning, or the talent coming in on the veteran side of it. It was just a case of like, this is the day and age in college football where you're no longer going to be able to be the Alabamas and stack 4-star after 4-star after 4-star after 4-star, because God forbid these kids want to play. And at some point, you got to look at it and say, well, you're taking your lump one way or the other. You're going to not bring in a veteran and say, okay, you know what, Peyton, you're our guaranteed second starter at safety, strong safety, free safety, whichever one you want to pick that's not Alex McLaughlin's, and you're our guy. But then that means you're going to have to come with the hurdles that come with it, which we saw Vincent Holmes this season have the mistake against Rutgers. And again, is a one small problem, but in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about an 9-4 team that could be an 11-4 team.
Sure.
And that's why you don't play the young guys as much, because it's like, that's why the veteran presence is so important, is what I'm trying to say.
No, I get that. I think that's necessary. That's important to bring up. It's just the problem that I'm sure people have of, hey, you say you prioritize the young guys and then you pass them over. It's just, you look at McEllisteen's returning experience at safety, and if that's the only body there, that's where the problem comes in. It's why you bring in other guys, just to be safe and to say, yeah, like, we think Peyton is great. We think Rashawn Clark. We think, whoever else like that. Yeah, we trust this guy to really get involved. There are not a lot of snaps taken just in terms of college football as a whole outside of McEllisteen, because the second most is Vincent Holmes, who we saw play dime a little bit. We saw him do a few different things at safety as well. And it was very clear that there's still some progression left for him, where I think that his role is going to be very different under Ryan Walters. But it's just a curious thing where it's a position that at the end of the day, I still feel really good about, where this is a really, really tough blow. But I feel really good about the position because it's one of the positions where, you talk about stacking 4-star after 4-star after 4-star. This is a position where that has happened. Rashawn Clark is a 4-star. Ryland Allen is a 4-star. Paul Menke was a 4-star, right? Like those guys are there. And so losing one of them sucks. And there's no way around that. But when you look at where, in terms of the talent has been stacked, it was always, oh yeah, it is kind of at safety. because when Jedd came in, he brought Rashawn Clark with him. He brought Raheem Wright with him. And it's clear they like those guys too. Like I think Rashawn Clark is somebody we might see a whole lot of in nickel this season. Like there's going to be a lot of opportunities for some of these guys to play. And it's just unfortunate that didn't work out for Peyton Waters, who is just a really promising athlete.
It's a good problem to be in. It means you're losing good talent and replacing it with good talent. It's a good problem. It's an unfamiliar territory for Washington fans to be in because of the transfer portal and all these sorts of things. But in this new age of college football, you're in a good position because the talent overall is not decreasing as you're ebbing and flowing. Yeah, you're losing experience, but as long as it's not going like this and then kind of like a parabola, then that's when you got issues. But right now, Washington's kind of just coasting in that similar kind of upward trajectory, very slow, but there's no decrease in talent.
I like that. So that's a really good way to put it. So let's get into these most important non-trench transfers. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. A couple ones that I really like, said it all year long. Josh Allen for MVP, Jaden Daniels for Rookie of the Year. Been saying it all year long. The odds might not be as good as they were a few weeks ago, but you can check all that out and so much more out over on the FanDuel app. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, Lars, I don't know about you, but I think for me, I know I said already on this show, I called Alex McLaughlin the most important non-trench transfer player, or most underrated. I don't think he's the most important. I think the most important is Johntay Cook.
Interesting. Okay, I wasn't sure you were going to expand on that. Or just
no. I didn't know if you would disagree with me or not.
So it's interesting. I'll answer it this way. He has the most upside.
Absolutely,
it's the highest ceiling, but so far arguably one of the more lowest floor, whatever you want to call it, in that whole thing.
Yeah, lowest floor.
Because in that way, it's Antonio Thompson in a way. And I'm not saying it's that, but it could go like that, where he hasn't had a ton of production at Texas. He didn't have a ton of production at Iowa, and he had a little bit more production at Western Michigan. But you're banking on the potential and the fit. And from that perspective, I absolutely agree. Like if Johntay Cook can end up being wide receiver 2 and unlock the other side, whichever, and whether it's Denzel going off or Johntay being the benefactor of Denzel being double covered and Kevin Green by proxy in that similar mold, that's a good problem to have. And I think that's why, in terms of unlocking the offense, that is outside of the trenches. Like that's the key right there. So I can agree with it from that perspective.
Okay, because I like where you're going with that. That is my similar thought process, where I agree with you on everything you said, but for me, it's the ability to stretch the field, because it's the ability to open stuff up underneath. It's the ability to just kind of set a new precedent at Washington, where you go through the 5-star talents that Washington has signed for the most part, haven't really had the best history in Seattle, which is unfortunate. Sam Heward, Savell Smalls, to name the most recent ones. It's unfortunate the way it's worked out. It is what it is. You can't, we're not playing revisionist history or anything on those guys, but it's Johntay Cook can set a new precedent of, oh, hey, this kid was a 5-star from Texas who goes out to Washington, finds a way to succeed. And that's all the off the field stuff, where it's that storyline can help on the recruiting trail. It can help Jedd Fisch's ultimate goal of expanding the footprint, because we know that's something that needs to happen, especially on the defensive line, which is very different than wide receiver, of course, but it's just a precedent of that's a name that people knew. That was a very important name when he committed to Texas and all that sort of stuff. So there's that impact of it, but then it's what he can do for Damon Williams. It's the usage. I know I've compared it to the way the Chicago Bears like to use DJ Moore. We're getting the ball. Just get the ball in his hands, let him turn upfield, try to break some tackles, do some different things. The play style is very different, but just in terms of utilizing his athleticism, I think it's very similar. But the speed, the ability that he brings to stretch out the defense is something where we know Damon has the arm talent to push the ball downfield, similar to what we saw in 22 and 23 Michael Penix. The arm talent's not the same, because Mike is just a one-of-one kind of guy. Shout out to DeBron and Damon Williams' dad for, making sure we got that in there. Shout out. But we know Damon Williams can push the ball down the field with that same intensity, with that same sort of velocity. And Johntay is the perfect guy where, Denzel Boston is going to get a lot of attention. So if you're going to leave Johntay on an island, I think that he's very confident in his ability to win a one-on-one. I think that Jedd Fisch is very confident in that ability, and I know Damon will be as well. So that's something that as we get into spring practice, I'm going to really, really be watching just that chemistry and how they might be utilizing those two players together to just see what that looks like moving forward. But Lars, who's your most important player that's not in the trenches?
So, I mean, it's kind of the obvious one in the room, but I'm going to take a different angle to get there. I'm going to take you back to 2016.
Okay.
Spring, fall camp 2016. Jake Browning in that offense couldn't do squat against the defense. Could not, what does Nick Saban say? Something through a tin horn, could not do anything. Could not move the ball. Could not do anything. And we're looking around, Adam Jude, Christian Capel, people of us out there saying, okay, is this good practice or is this a cause for concern? And the reason why I'm going to loop this full circle, Tacario Davis.
I know where you're going with this. Yep.
Tacario Davis, where we saw last spring where everyone was going against Ephesians Price Talk, and we saw Denzel, that seemed to be a really good matchup. This now takes it to a CFP level. And that's no slight to Price Talk. It's Kevin King to Marcus Peters. It's the, Batman to Robin. It's again, you're both going to go to the league if you succeed here. But the point being, for Johntay Cook, for Denzel Boston, for Audric Harris, for Marcus Harris, for all the young receivers in the room, going against a guy like Tacario day in and day out of practice, working out with a guy like that who probably could be a first-round pick this year, if not guaranteed next year. And you're thinking about, what does the impact have on the defense? Sure, absolutely, without question. Defense, Ryan Walters and Cook, all those. We've talked about that analysis. I want to take a different path to mentioning the impacts that Tacario have, because it's the same thing that Jonah has, where you look at the heartbeat that Jonah had, where he galvanized the offense. Really seemed to, everybody wanted to run behind him, and it's just on Jedd to call those plays. Now you're looking at it and saying, hey, every day in practice, Denzel's going against a first-round quarterback. That used to be the thing at Washington when you looked at John Ross, when you looked at Dante Pettis, reason Puka Nacua, Rome Odunze, Jalen Brown all came to Washington was, well, hey, yeah, we got, a certain receivers coach. I personally am a fan of Junior Adams, so I'm going to give him a shout out. But with that being said, you're looking at it and saying, okay, we're coming to do that, but it's also going against the best defensive backs in the country. That's what makes a true CFP team. Look at Penn State. You think Penn State's got some really good offensive linemen. You don't think that makes Abdul Carter better? You don't think
absolutely
that I know you do, but I'm just like, that's why I think it's even more important, not just what Tacario brings on defense or opposite Price Talk, which we've talked about 4, 5, 6 shows now, but it's that intangible that we don't see, which going in practice where, wow, Denzel's gotten really better at releasing. Well, yeah, try getting jammed against Tacario 9 out of 10 times.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. So when I look at the defensive side, I disagree with you, but because I think Tacario is going to be the most impactful. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it because of everything you just said. And I think that's a fantastic point. But you're not, as much as we like Thaddeus Dixon, you are gaining more in Tacario than you're losing in Thad. And I mean that with no disrespect to Thad. It's just, as you said, it's a first-round talent. It's a guy you cannot pass up on in that regard. And you want to see them both play together. Thad still hasn't made a decision. We'll see what that looks like. But you want to see those guys play together, and it's going to make everybody better. But in my opinion, the most important guy on defense is Buddha Al-Uqdah. And it's not necessarily close in my opinion, because, and everything I just said, you're losing way more at linebacker. You're losing way more on this defense in terms of tackles, in terms of everything that you want from Carson Bruner, Alfonso Tupatel, like Drew Fowler to an extent. Shout out to his little ESPN appearance. That was awesome. But it's Buddha for me, and it's not even a discussion, because you need somebody who can clean up tackles. I know his tackling grade wasn't great, missed a lot of tackles according to Pro Football Focus and everything, but this is something where you and I trust Robert Bala as a linebackers coach to help out with that. And on top of that, it's bringing in a veteran. It's having Kamori House as a sophomore would have been great. Him putting on extra weight, doing all those different things. Yeah, he's a fantastic athlete who would have fit well in the scheme, but having somebody like Buddha, who has way more production and is just a ball hawk, man. Look at, I think it's 4 forced fumbles last year, had the couple of interceptions. He is just always around the football. And it's something where if this defensive line improves, it doesn't need to all of a sudden become elite. It just needs to take steps forward. And if it's able to hold its own and really not get blown off the ball in every snap like we saw this past season, Buddha and X3 Alexander, and if he plays Jacob Manu, are going to be the biggest benefactors of that, because they're going to have so much more room to operate with guys like Simote, Pepa, and hopefully Javon Parker and everybody else in there eating space and just taking up blocks so that you can come in and clean up, which is going to be so important. And just replacing, because it comes down to replacing that production and replacing those tackles. And that's what Buddha is going to do, like not even Tacario has.
No, I agree. And I think I'll just kind of round out this whole thing. It all feeds off of itself. If Tacario's a lockdown corner, makes the job easier for the linebackers. If Buddha's got the front seven locked up, makes it easier for Simote Pepa on the defensive line, who, by the way, is kind of every time I bring up Simote Pepa's name, you know who I think of? Samapama.
Oh my God, that's a deep cut.
a finished product, if you will, of what Samapama could have been with that size, with that freak.
That makes me sad, man.
But look at Simote Pepa. Does he not remind you?
No, I agree. I see it. I get what you're saying. I think Samo was like a far superior athlete, just in terms of true athlete. Like he was on the Vita, like playing. But yeah, no, we're going down a rabbit hole that we don't have time for today.
But the reason why I bring him up is to say, of all three of these guys, all four of these guys, and the safeties hit, they all feed off of each other. And it's why you went, and you can look at, I'm really curious to talk to Ryan Walters about how he, kind of played a role in some of this, because these guys were already there before he got there.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of, how do you build this out, and kind of whose plan was it to come with some of these guys? Because really if Jedd's the one that gets the credit for it, they got all the guys they needed to get. Now, was it the first guy on every single board that they got at every position? No. Obviously not. But it's not so far down the board where you're looking and saying, oh my gosh, they got the 30th best tackle. They got the 20th best, cornerback. It's like we're coaching for Billy Bean's Moneyball here. It's no, the money's in play. Money's cooking. It's just, can the coaching cook with it?
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.